Hey there, it's Jesse Walter with Model Technology Solutions, and I'm here with the second part of the PS Invaders script that I wrote for the Automation Management Summit. If you missed part one, there's a link down below so you can get caught up. And really what we did was cover the load XAML function, and now we're going to go through the rest of the script and give you an idea of how I designed this and how I built it. So let's dive in. Starting top down, first I'm setting the location of the script root here. So what this does is it sets the location of the script, so when I just hit run script in ISE, it will change the directory to the root of the script here. And as we'll see down here, you see my current directory is in AMS. I'm going to hit play, which is PS Invaders. Okay. And you see now my directory has changed. So that way I ensure that we always launch it from the root of the script. So moving forth, here I'm dot sourcing that load XAML function that we went over in the first video. And then I am defining the path to the main window XAML that we created in Visual Studio and using that function to import the XAML for use in this script. So here I'm defining the array of invaders, and I know I have 14 invaders, and I probably could have taken the object type and just created a new object, much like I did with the sounds or with the missiles. But since I created those objects in Visual Studio and just copied and paste, it was really a lot easier, in my opinion, to just manually define it once here. Again, there's multiple ways to do this, but this is how I did it for this example. Defining the initial movement of the invaders to right, and we'll show that in a little bit why. And I'm adding the visible, or defining the visible property for visibility. And I'm defining the visibility property as visible for the intro text. That's the text that blinks at the very beginning. Right here, press enter to begin or escape to exit. Okay. Here I'm defining the directory of all the WAV files, and then using the system.media namespace to create variables for each sound that I load within the script using the sound player class. In a similar fashion, I created all the timers that I'm going to use throughout this script, and these timers control several things, such as controlling the flashing of the intro text as I showed using the start timer. The invader timer controls how often the invader sprites move. Fire 1 and Fire 2 timers control the speed of each of the missiles shot from the player or from the invaders. And I separated these two because the initial plan was to be able to increase the speed of the firing of the invaders, but I just didn't have enough time to get to that point. The random fire timer controls how often the invaders shoot, and the reset sprite timer is used when your player is hit to reset the sprite location and add a second between resetting it all to appear as if the game pauses. So now, again, this is not necessarily an order of operation, but was written this way for loading purposes. But here I'm adding event handlers for every time the timers tick. So you see the invaders tick go off. The script will determine if the invaders move variable is set to right, left, or down. Then it'll use a function defined lower called set sprite loc to set the sprite locations by controlling the margin property of the object. For the start timer, I'm just controlling the visibility property of the start text object, making it hidden, invisible, hidden, invisible. So every time that timer ticks, it changes. And that's what gives us the illusion of the flashing start text. The Fire 1 timer tick handler is a little more complex. So keep in mind, this all happens every time the timer ticks. First, I'm defining the location of the Fire 1 margin, so the script knows where it is. Then, if the top margin value of Fire 1 margin is greater than 0, we go in and check the properties for each invader at that specific time. So if the invader is visible, meaning it has not been hit since it resets the visibility property, as you'll see in a bit, and the margin settings overlap with the Fire 1 object, that constitutes a hit. So then the sound that I chose for the invader dead, or for a hit, plays. We take the Fire 1 visibility and we collapse it. And the difference between hidden and collapsed is hidden leaves a white space for the object, whereas collapse removes the white space, so it's not interfering with us anymore. And then stop that Fire 1 timer. Again, the invader visibility is collapsed. I add 100 points to the score and change that content property of the score display. But then I do a quick calculation and put in a variable called level clear. So I put in my array, and then for each of those objects in the array, if the visibility, I calculate how many have a visibility of collapse. And if that level clear count equals the array count, I know that all of those invaders have been hit. And then I run a function later on called set invader low, add the ta-da sound, which gives you the warm and fuzzies, increase the level by 1, and change the level display content to indicate which level you're on. Otherwise, if the margin is less than 0, the Fire 1 visibility equals collapse and the Fire 1 timer stops. The Fire 2 timer tick handler operates in a similar fashion, so I'm not going to run through it all. The primary differences are we reverse the margin crossover values from less than or equal to greater than or equal to, since we are hitting the top of the PS sprite, not the bottom of the invader. We then decrease the lives by 1, and if there are no more lives left, we end the game. The random fire timer tick handler is really straightforward. Every time it ticks, we randomly fire an alien cannon using the function that you'll see later on. With the reset sprite timer tick handler, we repurposed the start text variable that was on our intro screen that said press start or escape. Instead, after the PS sprite has been hit, we query ready. So I change that content of the start text to ready and make it visible, and then hide it, change it to go, make it visible again, and then collapse it. And then we run the function set sprite location, which puts our PowerShell sprite back into the middle of the board, and we start again. Then our final handler in the region is a closing handler that handles all of the timers. So I know that's kind of muddy, but when the GUI closes, it stops all the timers to help control memory leaks, which I still have some problems with, and maybe someone out there with some more true development chops could assist with. But this was my little workaround solution to ensure that the timers all stop when I close the GUI. And so here are our functions. As I said, here's the set sprite location function, and it requires you to define the sprite you wish to set and any top, left, bottom, or right properties of the margin. And when we reference that against the margin of the background, and I suppose I could have or probably should have used grid, but in this case we use background. But we reference that to make sure that the sprites do not fall off the side of the board, or they come to a stop at the boundary. We also change the move variable based on the location. So once an invader hits a side boundary, we move them all down a bit and then to the opposite direction. The set invader location function simply defines the initial location of each invader sprite based on the sprite next to it to ensure equal spacing and no overlap. We start with the first invader, define that, and then for each additional invader we reference the one before it, and then make the visibility property visible. And this is really only run at the beginning of the game and when everything's reset at the beginning of a new level. The fire shooter cannon function controls the missile that is shot from the PS sprite and ensures the margin is equal to the center of the current PS sprite location the time that is fired. By doing a little division, thank you very much, Algebra 101. The fire alien cannon works the same way as the shooter cannon, with a few differences. We choose the shooter at random based on the invaders that are still present in the array or not collapsed, right? They're still visible. Then we control the fire margin from the center point and the bottom of the invader. And the reset PS shooter function initiates the reset sprite timer, as you see here, which we saw earlier in the video. All right, so now we have some actionable handlers based on user input. So we want to control an event on the GUI object here for key down. So if I hit enter, everything that was visible initially will collapse, as you see here. And we'll define our variables for lives, score, and level, and make visible the items we want to display, such as our PS sprite, score, level text, etc. And we then run the set sprite location for the PS sprite and set invader location. So all this happens after you hit enter, and will initiate the invader timer and the random fire timer. So the invaders will begin moving and firing at random. Then we have our controls region. Same principle as before. While in the GUI, we control the key down event. If the key is left, we set the sprite location left by 10. If the key is right on the keyboard, we set the left margin property plus 10. Space fires your cannon, and escape will close the GUI and collect some of the leftover garbage. Again, use this to help prevent memory leaks. All right, now we want all of this to show, right? So the last things we need to add to the script, and these should be at the bottom every time, are initializing our start timer, playing our start sound that we hear when we launch the GUI, and showing the GUI. Keep in mind now that once we run the GUI.show dialog line, the script will not continue to execute until that line is complete or until the GUI is closed. So that's why we want this as the last actionable item. And then once the GUI is closed, we just clean up a little bit more. I remove all the variables and use that garbage collector once again to remove any memory leaks that are potentially there. So there it is. That is the PS Invaders script. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email. I'm at jesse.walter@model-technology.com. You can find our information down in the description below. Until next time, happy scripting.